Chapter 2a. A Blind Woman Can See. A few years ago, I was friends with Pete Carroll, who at that time was the head coach for the New York Jets. He kept telling me that I really needed to meet this woman he knew who was very unusual, who he felt had something to share that I would find important. I was so busy that I put him off for several months. Then one day, he asked if he could give her my phone number and have her call me. I agreed, and that is how I met Mary Ann Skinfield, an outstandingly unusual woman. I mentioned her briefly in the first volume of The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. Mary Ann was completely blind and technically had no eyes, could see absolutely nothing. However, she was able to perform normal everyday tasks. She could even read a book and watch television without any outside assistance. NASA scientists performed extensive tests to determine how she was able to see. They asked her what she was seeing inside her head while she was sitting in a room, and she, as she related to me later, told them that she was moving through space and was continuously watching what was going on in the solar system. Even more interesting was that she said she was restricted to this solar system and couldn't leave. Of course, NASA didn't believe that she was moving through space, and so they made up a test to see whether she was telling the truth. They asked her to move alongside one of their satellites and give them some kind of reading from it, a serial number or something. I'm not sure what it was, but she did it precisely. And from that moment on, Mary Ann belonged to NASA. They have never let her go and continue to use her for their own purposes. I don't think I would have played this game with them, but she did. At any rate, one day she called me, and we began a weekly conversation which we kept up for about 4 months. I found her to be incredibly interesting in her approach to the nature of the reality we live in, which she perceived as a series of images that originated from within her mind. Never did she think of this reality as real in the way most of us do. We talked on the phone every weekend about almost every subject one can think of, always from the point of view of her images. One day, after about 2 months, Mary Ann asked me if I would like to see through her eyes. I didn't hesitate and asked her what I should do. She said, "Simply lie down on the bed and make thy room as dark as possible." My wife, Claudette, had been listening in on our conversation, so she lowered thy blinds and turned off the lights. It was late at night, at the time of the new moon, so it was extraordinarily dark anyway. When Claudette was done, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Then Mary Ann told me to get a pillow and prop up the telephone receiver so that my hands were free. I did as she asked. I was now in a completely dark space with my eyes closed, waiting for something to happen. I remember feeling almost jittery with anticipation, for I knew that I was going to experience something new. After about a minute, she asked me if I saw anything, but there was nothing. It was simply dark like it usually is when I close my eyes. After perhaps another 5 minutes, she asked again, and there was still nothing. But shortly after, as if a light switch had been turned on, an image appeared all of a sudden in my inner vision. It was that of a television screen, and it was so real that I could hardly believe it. It was there, and my inner eyes kept scanning this inner TV for this was something I had never seen before in my whole life. Marianne somehow knew I was plugged into her vision, and she remarked, "You can see now, can't you?" All I could respond with was, "Yeah, what is this?" "It's just another way of seeing. Do you see the little screens around the big one?" In the center, I saw a big screen that appeared to be about 14 inches away from my eyes. Lots of little screens were lined up along its perimeter, perhaps 7 little screens along the top and 6 along each side. The little screens had very rapidly moving images in them, each one providing information about the central screen. Marianne asked me to look at the top right-hand screen and to look only at that one. I did as she asked. This screen showed images of living beings mixed in with geometric shapes. In other words, I would see, say, a dog followed by a tree, and a cube, and then the dog with a flower, and then an octahedron or some kind of geometric image. It continued in this way, at such speeds that my mind could just barely make out the images. Marianne told me that this little screen showed her what was in the immediate proximity of her physical body. It let her see, even though she was blind. Amazing. Marianne then invited me to look at the little screen at the bottom left. Again, there were very fast-moving images, but they were rather strange. They showed people who didn't look human, and sometimes even dolphins appeared on the screen. Marianne said that this was her communication system with her brothers and sisters from space and other dimensions. What she meant was ETs. Before I could think about what I had seen, she asked me to look at the central screen and tell her what I saw. I found myself looking out a window. It was perfectly real, not at all like looking at a TV monitor. And I saw deep space and thousands of stars everywhere. Never before had I seen the stars like this, and I could feel the extreme depth of space in my body. It was exciting, exhilarating. At that moment, NASA scientists were working with Marianne. They had her tracking the 21 fragments of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 that were about to crash into Jupiter. This was back in 1994. The comet fragments were moving behind the sun at that moment and were about to have a final meeting with their dramatic destiny in astronomical history by crashing into the surface of Jupiter. Marianne said to me, "Drunvalo, we are about to turn to the right. You will feel it in your body, but don't be concerned." Instantly, I began to feel like I was turning my body, but of course I was still lying on my bed. The view within the screen began to change, as if I were in a space capsule that was rotating clockwise. And there, directly in front of me, was one of the comet fragments that the whole world was watching from afar. I don't think we were more than 40 feet from this glowing fireball of dust and ice. It was extremely bright and seemed to be standing still. I just stared at this thing like I was watching a movie. Finally, Marianne began to speak. "I'm working for NASA at the moment. They want me to answer some of their questions about these comet fragments, but right now I wanted you to see how I see. What do you think?" Immediately, my focus went to another level of this experience. I realized that Marianne and I were seeing in the same manner all humans do. We were looking forward, but we couldn't see behind us unless we turned. From past experiences with other life forms, I knew that sometimes ETs could see spherically, in all directions at once. "Marianne, what is behind you?" Not in the reality you are monitoring, but in the higher reality. She didn't know. You know, I have never looked. I've never thought about it. I asked her if it would be all right for me to look and see, and she had no objections. She gave me permission, and so I told her to remain stationary as I looked back. I turned around to look at what was behind her, and what I saw shocked me so much that even now, after all this time, I feel strange as I relate my experience. Mary Ann had a consciousness that was not human. Behind her was the fourth dimension, and in front of her was the third dimension. She had a consciousness that was interfacing with both of these dimensions. Until then, I hadn't known this was possible. To describe this experience would be almost impossible unless one has had the experience of the fourth dimension. But all I can say is that the backside of her consciousness was utterly unique. Here was a woman who was unusual in more ways than just being a blind person who could see. She definitely was not from Earth. That much was clear. I felt sure that if someone were to take a sample of her DNA, anomalies would surface that would point to her origins outside of Earth's biological history. I continued to talk with Mary Ann for about another 2 months. After I had experienced the screens, she wanted to talk only in images and symbols, which she asked me to write down. Just like the small screen at the top right of the central screen, her communications were images of living beings mixed with images of geometric shapes. Somehow, I always knew what she was saying, even though my conscious mind was having trouble understanding. Then one day, it seemed our relationship was complete, and we both said goodbye. I remember thinking that this experience didn't fit into anything I knew, and so I filed it away in what I call my weird file, waiting for more information to allow newly gained knowledge to connect with other information. But truly, I didn't have any expectations at all. I just added this experience to all the other stuff in my weird file and went on with my life.